Bhargava. I graduated here in 2012. This will mention I started at Kent in 2012. I actually had, I think, a week and a half between my defense and when I started at Kent, which was quite a scramble to get the letter that said I really had a degree so that they would hire me the proper way at Kent. How many of you are current students? Okay. Are you current doctoral students or masters? Okay. Couple of doctoral students, couple of masters. Okay. So I'm just trying to think of what's going to be useful for you to hear. Okay, so I'm now working at Kent State University. Just a little bit about Kent State. Kent State has 9 regional campuses. The main campus is in Kent, Ohio. And then there's 9 regionals all around the Northeast Ohio region. We have about the same, we have about 40,000 students, which is about the same as Pitt's system as well. And on the Kent campus, we do the 4-year degrees and the master's and the PhD. Most of the regional campuses do 2-year degrees and some do 4-year degrees. So that's kind of how our system is set up. I think 45% of our students are first-generation college students, so nobody in their family has gone to college before, to give you some idea of kind of students we work with. I think we have about 13 or 14% of Black students in our population. And actually in our College of Public Health, we have 26% of students of color, which is great. I think really something I've enjoyed. So we just got CEF accredited. So if you guys know what that is, the Council on Education for Public Health. Our college is 9 years old, and I've been there, this is my 6th year, and we're in our 9th year. So I've been there pretty much since the start of when we had all of our programs up and running. That was really exciting and really, really, really a lot of work because you don't have anything. Everything you want, you have to make it. There's no student handbook, there's no faculty handbook, there's no form for this or a process for that. You have to make up everything as you're going, so it's a lot of work to do that. But it was really exciting and enjoyable. Let's see. Okay, so some of the work that I do at Kent State is in curriculum. So I wanted to share some of that work with you because that's kind of a lot of where I found the teaching and curriculum is what my focus has been and started off being, but really thinking about, we have an undergraduate public health program. So we have a BSPH, so a Bachelor's of Science in Public Health. I think there are only 15 accredited Bachelor's of Science in Public Health programs in the country. So right now it's not a very common degree. So there's still a lot of talk about what should it look like and what should it be and how should we make it different from an MPH and things like that. And so that's also been really interesting, but a lot of the curriculum still need to be kind of worked on and formed, and a lot of the things that they put together classes for a whole undergraduate degree in a semester. So you can imagine that they maybe needed a little work. So I've had a chance to be able to work on those classes, which has been really, really enjoyable. Let's see. Keep pressing the wrong button. Okay, so this is where my real interest has been, okay? So this is a picture of bandwidth, okay? So what I talk about in my research, what I did for my dissertation, and my research that I do now, and in my work at the university, is mental bandwidth. Okay, so you have 11 million bits per second of processing power in your brain. So 11 million bits per second you can process. But you have control over about 100 bits. Okay, 100 of the 11 million is what you have control over. Okay, so when you think about that, that's a really tiny amount that you have to figure out how to use for everything that you need to get done. And that's what I'm referring to as your mental bandwidth. Okay, you have those 100 that you have control over that you want to figure out what to do with. What we know is that when you look at people's mental bandwidth, there are some things that take away from it, that make it so you have less of it. And some of the things that we've really seen are financial insecurity, poverty, right? Dealing with things like racism, dealing with things like sexism, having chronic diseases. All of these things take away from your bandwidth. So you might start with 100, but you might really only have 60 to work with because those other things are taking stuff away, right? And so thinking about how do we think about our bandwidth and how do we recognize how bandwidth is important to how much we can succeed? Because bandwidth is what we need to be successful in the things that we're trying to do. Whether it be learning, whether it be health behavior change, which is what my dissertation was about. Whatever you're trying to do, if you don't have the mental bandwidth, you ever know that feeling when you're like, I cannot think about one more thing? Like, just don't say anything else. I tell my partner this all the time, but he's a big talker. So I'll sometimes be like, okay, my brain is tired, stop. I don't want to hear one more Supreme Court case summary or something. Like, that's enough. My brain is done. I'm going to play my Candy Crush now, right? Okay, that helps me to recover my bandwidth. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about bandwidth. You only have so much to work with, right? You got to give it a break too. So half of the time that I have last year and this year, and looks like next year, I spend half of my time as a faculty member with the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion on campus. So they pay for half of what my effort is, and one of the things I've been working on is our Great Place Initiative, which is based on our climate study. So we did a big climate study, basically not climate like environmental climate, but climate in terms of the culture and the social norms and how people feel, and do they feel welcome, and do they feel like they belong. So the university did this huge climate study, and now we have all the results, and we need to figure out what to do with them. And so a lot of my work is taking those results and putting strategies into place to address the problems. Because one of the things we found is some students in particular, and faculty and staff too, because it was all the way across the board, they don't feel like they belong. They don't always feel welcome. They feel like people don't appreciate them. We had, I think, 38% of our students, our undergraduate students, said that they feel like the faculty judge them before they get to know them, right? And those are the kinds of things that you really, that's, you know, if you come into a classroom and you feel like the faculty doesn't like you and you haven't even done anything yet, that takes away your mental bandwidth. And it's no surprise that you might not be as successful in the class as other people. So there are things like feeling like you belong, addressing any kind of stereotypes that you think people might have against you. And so the work that I've been doing with bandwidth, I have a colleague at the University of Oklahoma that I met through a teaching and learning conference. And if you like teaching at all, I strongly recommend Scholarship of Teaching and Learning Conferences. But I met her there, and she just finished a book called Bandwidth Recovery. And it's about strategies on how do you help students get back some of the bandwidth. So a lot of what she's talking about is classroom interventions. They're short 10-minute, 15-minute things that you can do in the classroom in the first week of class that help your students feel like they belong, that remind them of their values and why they want to be there, that have been shown to decrease the gap in achievement between students in the course. So her book is about that. I am now working on the book on how do we reduce our bandwidth requirements for our students. So here's one of the things that I've noticed in higher education. We have some really standard measures of success. GPA is a standard measure of success. What determines your GPA? Your grades, but what determines your grades? The teachers, right? I can tell you as a professor, I am not always objective when I grade. It's impossible to always be objective. You're always gonna let some of your biases come in. Unless you don't know whose paper is whose, I don't think anyone can complain that can say that they're completely objective when they grade things. Okay, what else? Your background? In what way? Okay. Did you have a good high school preparation, right? Did you have a good undergraduate preparation if you're going into graduate school, right? Do you have support from your family? Are you working full time, right? Are you sick? I have a student last semester who was diagnosed with a disease where basically anything can make her have an allergic reaction at any time. And she never knows what it's gonna be, and she's trying to figure out how to deal with it, but she could come to class, and if somebody has something in the room that it turns out her body wants to be allergic to, she's gonna have an allergic reaction. She's dealing with a lot of missing mental bandwidth. Yeah, right? So thinking about our common measures of success, GPA is not a very good way to measure people's potential. It measures very specific things, but it's not good at measuring potential, and I think it really hurts us when we don't recognize the things that our students are doing beyond GPA. So some people will be like, oh, well, we have them write essays and they have their resumes and right, we do things like that. Well, what does your resume show? Whether you need to work full time, right? It might show, doesn't necessarily show if you're a wonderful person because you volunteered, but it might show that you need to work 40 hours on top of your full-time schoolwork to get through. What essays show? I learned how to write an essay when I was like 6, right? My parents were both professors. Anytime I ever wrote an essay, they said, this is what you say. This is going to broaden my horizons and blah, 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 right? That's what you put in your essay, and then they select you for that opportunity. So thinking about other measures of success, somebody at Rutgers, actually, Timothy Eatman, is doing an honors living and learning community. Really amazing work that they're doing there. And the criteria that they're using to evaluate, to choose students for their honors living and learning community are resilience, community engagement, and critical thinking. Now, if you gave students degrees based on resilience, there'd be a whole different group of students graduating, right? So that's a lot of the work that I'm doing, is figuring out how can we re-envision what student success looks like. So you might be thinking, what does this have to do with public health, right? I do teach in the College of Public Health. I teach a health disparities class. I teach a capstone class. But what my real thing is that, in order to get health equity, we need to have social equity. And we can't ignore that the social equity is the foundation for the health equity. That's how come we have worse and worse health disparities and they never get any better. Because we keep ignoring it. We keep addressing it as a health issue and not as a bigger picture social issue. So really thinking about how do we find ways to build more equity, social equity in, is going to provide that foundation for health equity. So I think that's my stuff for now. But I look forward to questions.